Students, families, counselors, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever it is in the world you are joining us. Thank you so much for joining StriveScan's virtual college exploration program. A few housekeeping notes before we begin with this session. First and foremost, you're encouraged to ask questions throughout the session via the Q&A button that you see on your screen. When you submit a question, it is sent to our panelists, and they'll work to answer the question during the session and at the conclusion of the session. If you have a question about a specific institution, please make sure to indicate that in your question. So instead of saying, how's your pre-med concentration, say, hey, Rhodes College, I'm really interested in your pre-med concentration. Tell me a little bit more about that. That way they can follow up with you as well. The presenters may not get to every question today, so just be mindful that this is a 45-minute session. As a reminder, your camera and your microphone are turned off. The panelists cannot see you or hear you, so any questions should be typed in through that Q&A. And this is one of 50 individual information sessions and panel presentations that is being run by the Colleges That Change Lives. Each of these institutions presenting on the panel today have their own individual information session as well. Some have already occurred, some are upcoming through the rest of the day today. You can check out the entire schedule at strivescan.com/virtual/CTCL. And finally, when you signed up today, you received a barcode. You don't need that for this virtual program. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my panelists.
Thanks, Zach. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We're so excited that you could join us today. Let me share the screen. One of these days I'll learn to do that very smoothly while I'm talking, but I'm not that swift yet. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Lauren Sefton. I'm with Rhodes College, a liberal arts college in Memphis, Tennessee, but I also sit on the board of the Colleges That Change Lives. And I am joined with me today by Rion from the College of Worcester, Marie from Cornell College, and Jenny from St. Olaf College. And we are so excited to speak with you a bit more about the college admission process, specifically with questions and thoughts and ideas and tips aimed at being an international student looking at applying to US colleges and universities. We are going to talk a little bit about CTCL itself as an organization, but if you were interested in having the broader Colleges That Change Lives presentation, then you can watch that on the StriveScan website or on the CTCL website. We'll talk a little bit more about the liberal arts education and what that liberal arts philosophy looks like, the financial aid landscape, testing options, which of course might look a little bit different now under COVID, and ways that you can explore colleges virtually, especially in this post-COVID world. And then we'll have time for questions. So please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box below. With that, the Colleges That Change Lives is a consortium, a nonprofit organization of 44 colleges and universities, most of which are private, but 2 are public. We are scattered across the country in 26 different states, and our average enrollment as a whole collectively is around 1,500 students. So we're really focused on that small liberal arts and sciences undergraduate experience. We are based as a nonprofit, but we are founded with our roots in a book written by a man named Lauren Pope, and this book was first published in 1996. The most recent revision, which was the 4th revision, was in 2012. And as a group, we've collectively been traveling together since 1998. We do typically travel and do domestic tours in the US. We have done some international tours in China and Latin America as well. Obviously, with COVID, we are not doing any sort of traveling together physically as a group for college fairs, which is why we're so excited to bring to you this opportunity to meet virtually through StriveScan. This month, there'll continue to be new sessions in September and October as well. And as Zach mentioned, you can always watch and rewatch our presentations on the StriveScan and CTCL websites. But truly, Colleges That Change Lives as a nonprofit is really dedicated to de-stressing and demystifying the college admission and college search process, and really focusing on the philosophy of fit, of finding the right fit for you, and really having a student-centered college search, which is so important and sometimes more difficult than you can imagine. So things that you're probably thinking about as you think about your own college search is, how do I even get started? Well, US News and World Report gets a lot of press. So maybe you should be looking at US News and World Report rankings. Or maybe you should look at groups of schools that everybody's heard of, like the big public universities or the Ivies. But the big question is, what else is out there? And I really think that you want to also think about personal fit, because there's a lot of myths and misperceptions about the liberal arts and sciences. And Rion's going to talk a little bit more about that as well. But I think the fallback option is that we love lists, right? As humans, we just love lists. BuzzFeed and all of that, we want the top 10 whatever on it. We want the top ranked whatever on any product that we buy. I encourage you to really dig into the science, into the data of US News and World Report, for example, and figure out, is this really the best search tool for you? And I say that because I want you to look at the screen and think about the way US News and World Report gathers their data, and ask yourself, are these also important values for you and your family? Because I'm guessing if I ask what is important to you in your college search, you probably aren't thinking about alumni giving. You probably aren't thinking about even faculty resources. You probably are thinking about, what kinds of relationships am I going to have with my professors? How do I make friends? How do I find people that are going to be interesting and lifelong friends even long after I graduate? So there's something else out there for you, some other things that I really want you to think about. The Gallup-Purdue Index is a report that was based out a couple years ago. In 2015, they surveyed over 30,000 graduates across the US who have a bachelor's degree. And they basically asked, what do you consider your return on investment from your college experience to be? And out of those 30,000 graduates, it really was not about where you went so much as what you did while you were in college. So the odds of strongly agreeing that your education was worth the cost of attendance really was about the activities and experiences you had over the course of your 4 years. You were almost 2 times more likely to say that your education was worth the price tag if you had a professor who cared about you as a person, if you had a mentor who encouraged you, if you were extremely active in extracurricular activities. You were 1.5 times more likely to agree with that statement about your education being worth it if you had an internship. And so those things, professor relationships, mentors, internships, engaged activities over the course of your 4 years, are really what colleges that change lives and liberal arts and sciences colleges are all about. Another website or resource you might use is the National Survey for Student Engagement, or NSSE. And those benchmarks provide things about levels of academic challenge, active and collaborative learning, student and faculty interaction. Did you have an enriching educational experience? Is it a supportive campus climate? And those are the kinds of things that I really want you to dig into, those campus climate questions when you're doing your research. Not what resources do your faculty have at their disposal? Because let's be honest, at some universities, faculty aren't even sharing those resources with undergraduate students. So let's throw those things out the window and really focus on what matters: engagement, interaction, mentorship, collaboration with professors and peers, and truly having a vibrant campus experience. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Rion to explain a little bit more about the liberal arts philosophy in 2 minutes or less.
Okay, so I'm going to try to do this in 2 minutes or less. I think I can do it. So to start with, the US system and the liberal arts is a little bit different than any of the educational systems that you'll find elsewhere in the world. So it's important to kind of understand what makes our education system here unique. So to start with, the liberal arts is a curriculum. It's not a school. It's the general undergraduate education model in the United States, and it's the type of classes that you take as a Harvard undergrad, just like at the College of Worcester, at Rhodes, at St. Olaf. It's this idea that you're taking classes not only in your major, but in other subjects to enhance your core learning and allow you to look at your education from different points of view, to think critically, and to kind of adapt throughout your career. So the difference between a liberal arts college and a university then is simply that a liberal arts college typically only has undergraduate programs, because this is more of an undergraduate curriculum, different than what you would study at a PhD. So those students at a liberal arts college would do the 4-year bachelor's degree and then continue on to their master's or PhD, which are traditionally offered at universities. So universities are typically larger and they include both that undergraduate and graduate programs. So when you're talking about a liberal arts college versus a university, it's the same in terms of the curriculum at the bachelor's level. But the difference is typically the size and the type of levels that they offer at the university. Universities are typically larger and do offer those graduate programs. The liberal arts curriculum is this idea that you're not preparing just for one job, you're preparing for your whole career. People don't have a career ladder these days generally, right? People tend to have several jobs over the course of their lives. I've had several jobs, including working as a waitress at a pizza restaurant, which wasn't my favorite job, but was really helpful in learning a lot of skills, right? What we want you to be able to do is take all of these lessons that you're learning in the classroom and through things like your internships and your experiences and your part-time campus job and things like that, and kind of building them up and being able to kind of identify challenges and meet them and come up with innovative solutions. And to do that, you really need to understand how to look at your subject from a different point of view. So if you're thinking about economics, for example, you can't discount the effects of, for example, politics, public health, right? A variety of other subjects. And so by taking subjects outside of your major, we want you to be able to grow in what you're learning in your major. And hopefully that will allow you to have the flexibility to change jobs or even careers over your lifetime. I think as an example, disruptive technologies like robotics, artificial intelligence. So think about those. Those are being created by students who studied technology, engineering, and design, but who also need to understand the human experience, psychology, sociology, art, and a variety of other disciplines. And the liberal arts brings all those people together in one classroom to collaborate and exchange ideas. And that's what we want to see these students do after graduation and throughout their careers. So innovation is really key. Now, when a lot of students think of liberal arts, they might think of the arts and humanities and things like that, but actually STEM majors are very popular: computer science, biochemistry, physics. And I have kids every year that go into scientific or medical research who go on to become dentists, architects, a variety of professional degrees that you might not think of when you think of liberal arts. But in the US, it's quite ingrained that everybody's doing the liberal arts. And so that's just a fact of, okay, you're going to do pre-medicine, it's going to probably be a liberal arts style education, because like I said, it is a curriculum, right? All right, so when I guess my 2 minutes is almost up, but I want you to think about, when you think of the liberal arts, both your major and the fact that you're learning how to incorporate those different points of view, working with people from diverse backgrounds, preparing yourself to think critically and take on challenges and opportunities throughout your career. And that's kind of the main thing that we're trying to do, right? I think you'll find in an American classroom that it is a really lively discussion-based classroom where students and professors are problem solving together. And I think that that's a great example of why the liberal arts is so valuable, because you can learn to interact with people and have those discussions to kind of continue to grow and expand your worldview. So thank you so much. And I will turn it over to my colleague. I think Jenny's next. Okay, great.
Awesome. That was the best liberal arts I've heard. All of these sections of our presentation could be probably an hour-long presentation. So we're just giving you little snippets of each topic to hopefully give you the basic terminology so you can ask more questions later and ask all of the schools that you're looking at questions about each of these things as well. So I'm here to tell you just a little bit about financial aid, probably in just about 2 or 3 minutes as well. So for most students, international and students in the United States, financial aid is often one of the very biggest concerns and stressors in the college search. For international students, a lot of times students are thinking, I see this price of what a college will cost, what each year will cost, and sometimes students think there is no way that you can afford that price, so they cross that school off. And then there's other students on the other end of the spectrum who think schools in the US offer financial aid, so I'll get a full scholarship and I won't have to pay anything. In reality, it's oftentimes somewhere in the middle, and each school has different policies. So like a lot of the things in admissions and applying to schools, a lot of times it depends on each school that you're looking at. So this is going to be general information, but again, we'll give you the basic terminology. So it is true that a lot of colleges and universities in the United States will offer financial aid and scholarships for international students. So as you're looking at schools and as you're considering different options, that's a great first question. Do you offer financial aid and scholarships? And then if they do, you can dig more into that about what the qualifications are and ask more information. Terminology in this whole process can be confusing all around, but some terms in the financial aid process are pretty specific. A lot of times I'll be at a college fair and students are very quick to ask, are you need blind? Because the idea is that if you have high financial need and you need a lot of scholarship, you're probably thinking, I want to find a school that has a Needblind financial aid policy, so my high financial need will not be a factor. That's very true, but there are only a handful of schools in the entire United States that are both totally Needblind in the admissions process and also would meet your full financial need. That's so very rare. And for those schools, their acceptance rate is so very small that we often encourage students to broaden their search beyond those few schools. So Needblind means that a school will consider your application with zero thought to your financial need. They won't consider it as they make their admissions decision. Need-sensitive admission is a lot more common. Most schools in the US, I'd say, especially for international students, are going to be need-sensitive in the process. Need-sensitive means that for a portion of their applicant pool, they're going to take financial need into consideration. And that doesn't need to be a bad thing. In my mind, my school is a need-sensitive school. We're going to look at financial need to make sure that we can meet the financial need of every student we offer admission to. So if we offer you admission, you would get a financial aid package a week or so later that would meet your full financial need because we've already taken that into account. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you won't get really significant financial aid. Meeting financial need is that other term that you want to look for. If schools are saying that if you are offered admission, you will get the financial aid to make that school a real viable possibility, then that could be a real good option for you to consider. So merit scholarships, need-based grants, talent scholarships, these are all different types of financial aid and scholarship. Financial aid and scholarship is often the same thing, but they're the different components. So merit scholarships are usually based on your academics, on your academic work. Need-based aid and grants is based on your financial need, which probably makes sense. Talent and athletic scholarships. Some schools will offer scholarship based on maybe music or fine arts or studio art. Athletic scholarships, if you are one of the very best football players in your country or one of the very best swimmers, there may be athletic scholarships available. But one thing to consider with athletic scholarships is in the United States, there's different divisions of the athletic landscape. And only Division I and Division II schools can offer athletic scholarships. Many schools, or Division III schools, many schools cannot offer athletic scholarships, even though we have great opportunities for you to continue playing athletics. So again, as you think about the best option of schools for you, don't cross schools off just because they don't have athletic scholarships. You still may qualify for other types of financial aid. Loan is money that you have to pay back. While you can't take out loan from the US government as a non-US citizen, some schools will include institutional loan as part of their financial aid package. And then work study or your campus job. Because international students can't easily work off campus to earn money, most schools will include a campus job as part of your financial aid package, so you can earn some money towards either your cost of attendance at the school or to buy books or for just personal funds. So I've already gone through the components of a financial aid package. Oftentimes it will include a portion of scholarship and grant that you don't have to pay back. It might include a loan, but that's not quite as common. And that is money that you're borrowing and then eventually pay back to the institution. And then the campus job will be a small portion of your financial aid package. How to apply? And I'm going to clarify here because we saw a great question come through. This will depend on your citizenship. So for non-US citizens, you could there's the International Student Financial Aid application and the CSS profile. Both of these are very common financial aid applications that you'll see at a lot of schools. And then some schools will have their own application for international financial aid. So you'll see a variety of different options. The ISFA is free. CSS profile, there's a cost, but there's also fee waivers that you can request from each school. So a good question to ask each school that you're applying to, how do they want you to apply for financial aid? For US citizens living overseas, and I think there's some of you on this session, which is great. If you're applying for financial aid, as each school might have different categories that you're in, but you'll generally apply as a US citizen instead of an international student because of the financial aid process. You can submit the FAFSA and that qualifies you for federal financial aid. Supporting documents will depend on each school, but usually that's verifying the funding that you have. The certification of finance form, again, this is back for international students. This is required eventually for the visa. So this is just verifying that you have enough funding between what the college is providing and what you have at home to be able to afford to attend the institution. So some tips and advice before I pass it over. Know your resources and what you and your family will be able to contribute. In the box at the bottom of the slide, financing your education should be considered a partnership. It is part of your responsibility, it's part of your family's responsibility, and then for many of the schools providing financial aid, it's college and university providing some funding as well. So it's usually a combination of all those three things. So know your resources, know what you and your family will be able to contribute. Be honest and realistic as you apply, because if you suggest that you don't have the funding available, that might change the admissions process. If you suggest that you have way more than you actually do, you might not get the financial aid that you need. So being honest is really important. As with all things in the admissions process, pay attention to deadlines, that's important. And again, applies to everything in the admissions process. Do your research, ask a lot of questions. All of us at the schools you're applying to are here to help you and to answer your questions. So it's a complicated process, but we're here to try to make it easier. So thanks a lot.
All right, my name is Marie Schofer and I'm from Cornell College, and I'm going to talk about two different topics. One is testing and one is virtual visit opportunities. To echo what Jenny said earlier, is different schools have different policies. I will admit that I did much of my college research using a spreadsheet to try to keep it all straight in different columns and different rows. So if that is helpful for you, I do recommend that. But to talk about testing, in addition to schools having different policies, the COVID-19 pandemic has also led to changes to a lot of policies. Many of us have seen it become more difficult for both our domestic students and our international students to register and sit for these different tests. And so some of us have come up with ways to adapt and adopt different policies to help students navigate this process. So first I'm going to talk about the SAT and ACT. For some schools, these exams are test optional, and for others they are test flexible. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the difference between those. Test optional means that an institution is allowing you to choose whether you submit a test or not, an SAT or an ACT. Test flexible means that perhaps there are other ways that you can demonstrate your academic preparation for college. So perhaps you could demonstrate your academic preparedness through an AP exam or an IB exam score or some other combination. Again, every school is a little bit different here, so you'll want to research on websites and talk to admission counselors about this. You'll also want to ask how these tests are used in terms of both admission and scholarship decisions. Sometimes a school may be test optional, but they do require a test score to be considered for scholarships. So you'll want to ask that question. Another term you'll hear occasionally is superscoring. And superscoring means that on both the SAT and ACT, where there are different subject sections, if you took those tests multiple times, like if you took more than one SAT, we could take your highest sub-scores in the different categories and put those together from two different tests. So, or same with the ACT. So that would allow you to then come up with that super score. And sometimes that can help students both with admission and scholarships. So you'll want to ask if schools do that. In general, I would say that most schools would encourage you to go ahead and send all of your test scores, because then we can do that super scoring for you. And you can ask this question as well, but the most schools that I have been associated with will always look at you on your best day. We recognize that you may have had the flu one day when you took the ACT, and it might not have been your best overall composite score, but perhaps your math score was really amazing that day, and we want to make sure we're seeing you at your best. Also, holistic application review is something that many schools, many CTCL schools utilize, and that is, even if you submit a test score, even if we require you to submit a test score, we are going to look at everything in your application file. You're not just the sum of a test score. You are also what you put in your essay and what you have done over the course of your high school career and what your teachers and your counselors say in their recommendations. You are all of those things. So you'll want to also ask, as colleges, do they use holistic admission application review processes? Now, taking the next section down, we'll talk about English language proficiency. In addition to the ACT and SAT testing, some colleges will separately require you to demonstrate English language proficiency. Some will be test flexible and will allow you to submit a TOEFL or an IELTS score in place of an ACT or an SAT. So again, good question to ask. But in terms of English language proficiency, one way to demonstrate your English language proficiency is through submitting some type of standardized test score. Very commonly accepted test scores are TOEFL, the IELTS, Duolingo. There are many out there, and most typically colleges will list those on their website, and oftentimes they'll even list minimum guidelines for what we feel will best prepare you to be successful at our schools. It really varies between colleges on how much English support they can offer, and so you'll want to find a school that's the right fit for you in terms of your English abilities and what kind of support is available. Some students can also submit English waivers to demonstrate that perhaps English is a first language, perhaps their K through 12 schooling has been entirely in English. Sometimes schools will provide that documentation to students so that we can see that in the application process. And then a final way that you may be able to demonstrate your English proficiency is through an interview. And commonly that could be with one of us, admission counselors, who sit down and talk to you. It could be with a faculty member on a campus. It could be with someone that the college hires to do these types of interviews. So these are all different ways that you could experience testing. Ultimately, you'll want to ask yourself, or ask colleges, three main questions, which are, what are the testing requirements? Can I self-report those test scores that I've taken? And will not submitting a score affect my scholarship consideration? So all good things to consider. The next topic that I'd like to go over is virtual visit opportunities. Again, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the way students visit and interact with colleges. And for international students living abroad, I actually believe that you have more opportunities today to interact with colleges than you did prior. We all had these technologies like Zoom available to us before, but we have become so much more proficient and creative in the way that we use them that, again, it is a benefit to you and to counselors abroad that are looking to interact with us. So a few of the different ways that you can interact with a college. The one I put at the very top here is the campus visit, just the general campus visit. We have ways to provide virtual campus tours. We can meet with you as admission counselors. We can set up meetings with professors, with coaches, with student life professionals, with folks from our career center. Many colleges can provide very customized visits for you, where you will have kind of a series of appointments to interact with folks on campus. This could also include current students. So investigate those options. This is probably, in my opinion, one of the ways that you can get most connected to a school. Many of us have also converted our events, our open houses and our admitted student events and our daily information sessions to online virtual settings as well. That's another great way to get to know a college. And if you're just starting to get to know a college, this might actually be the best way, because you won't have to be front and center as part of that visit. You can be part of the audience, listening, learning, and then once you decide to narrow your college search to just a handful of schools, then you might want to engage in that more individualized campus visit that I mentioned earlier. We are also still on the road virtually visiting high schools. There are ways that we can visit your school, meet with your counselor, and meet with you as students. You can ask your school counselor about these opportunities. And oftentimes we as admission counselors are very open to requests. So if there's a couple students at a high school in India that want to meet with us, well, reach out to us, reach out to your counselor and have them reach out to us. And oftentimes we can schedule a visit. College fairs, you're already participating in one, so great job. You found a way to learn more using a college fair. There are many, many, many out there, so continue to research that as an opportunity. An interview, as I mentioned earlier in the English language proficiency section for testing, an interview is a great way to demonstrate your English proficiency, but it's also a great way to have a one-on-one conversation with an admission counselor. And in addition to demonstrating English proficiency, ask some questions. There's usually time at the end of that interview to ask some questions, and asking a question is a good way to show that your language skills are strong. It's also a good way for you to learn about the college and learn what you want to learn about the college, the very specific questions you might have. We also are very proficient with texting, chatting, using apps like WhatsApp, email. There are so many ways that admission counselors communicate, and we are always looking to find out what is the way you like to communicate. I work with students who use all different forms of communication, and I'm flexible and I make notes of that so that I always contact those students in that way that they're most comfortable with. So please feel free to reach out to us in multiple different ways. Why is the campus visit important, even if it's a virtual visit? For you, the student, it's a great way. It is the best way to find out if the college is the right fit for you. You can peruse the website, and the websites are great, but interacting with the people on the campus is really, I think, the best way to determine if it's the right fit for you. For colleges, we love when students participate in these visits because you can demonstrate your interest in us, and you can also help us, the admission counselor, be a stronger advocate for you. Once I get to know my students, I can help guide that student to resources that may be helpful to them. I can even potentially advocate for them in the admission and scholarship process. But every college is different in that way, so I can't speak for every college and how they do that, like making admission and scholarship decisions. But again, it never hurts to have an advocate in your corner, and we love getting to know our students, so take advantage of it for that reason too.
Wonderful. Thank you to all of our panelists for sharing their perspectives and information. We are receiving a couple great questions. Please feel free to add your questions into the Q&A box. We've got about 10 minutes left to help address any questions that you might have. And Rian, I wonder if you can start us off with, we had a great question about the secondary school report. Some schools ask for a recommendation letter from a school counselor. What should a student do if their school doesn't have a designated counselor?
Yeah, that happens a lot more than you might think. So anyone at your school who can speak to your educational kind of environment and your achievements would be fine for a school counselor letter. It could be, for example, the head teacher for your grade, or it could be the school principal or headmaster. And occasionally at some schools where the school might not be an English medium school, it can sometimes be the teacher who's the head of the English department or something like that.
Great, thank you.
We're pretty flexible, guys. We've been doing this a long time, I've been doing it a long time. I don't know, seems like a long time. We're here to work with you, right? And so I know a lot of students worry, what if they see my grades and they look really low because my country has a very difficult grading scale, right? Like, what if I'm from India and my grade 11 exams are really low? And we understand how the Indian educational system works, for example, and the emphasis on grade 10 and grade 12 boards and how you prepare for that and what your internal grades might look like. And that goes for all the systems. Now, all of us don't see every educational system around the world every day, but we're familiar with most of them. And if we're not, we have so many great resources to help us evaluate your application within the context that you are studying. So, so just do your best and don't worry about what curriculum you have or what your transcripts look like. As long as you're doing your best, we'll do our best to try to understand your personal situation. And that's an advantage of what we call holistic admissions, which means that we're looking at everything in your application. Not all schools do that, but the schools that are here, the colleges that change lives schools generally do that. They look at every piece of your application, right? So we're interested in your recommendations to tell us about you and your contributions to your education, to your class. We're interested in what you've been involved in. We're interested in your essay and what you have to tell us about yourself. So we are looking at all of these things, and we, I would say we generally know what we're doing. So, don't be worried about if there's an exception that needs to be made or something like that. Feel free to email your admissions counselor and ask them what they would prefer, but we can definitely be flexible, and especially now, when there might be additional challenges this year due to public health concerns, certainly that's something that we're willing to work with you on.
Thanks, Rayon. Speaking of some challenges this year and public health concerns, Marie touched upon a little bit of this in her presentation under COVID, and I wonder, Jenny, if you can also speak to this perhaps, but with the current situation of COVID, we know certainly there have been some visa issues and some immigration issues as well. How are colleges preparing for international students, and what might that look like on a college campus these days, Jenny?
Yeah, that's a great question and really important as you consider where you might attend. You want to make sure that the institutions you're looking at are going to be as safe as possible and keep you as healthy as possible. So schools in the United States, at least, are all approaching it differently, but the main priority is to keep the students, staff, faculty, and greater community members as safe and healthy as possible. So some of the things that many of us are doing include testing students who are coming in and staff and faculty, so anyone on campus. And that's just a way to get kind of a baseline to see how serious things could be and whether or not there has to be quarantining or isolation. There's plans for quarantine. So as students arrive on campus, many have to be quarantined for a certain amount of time if the campus is testing to again keep everybody as safe as possible. And then social distancing continues to be important, and a lot of times that comes into play in the classrooms. So if you picture a college classroom or your high school classroom, for instance, if there are 25 or 30 students in a classroom, it really depends on how much space is available. So schools are doing different things to make sure that there's fewer students in certain spaces to be able to spread out as much as possible. And for a lot of schools, the solution to that is to create hybrid classes. So there's some classes that are offered fully online at a lot of schools this year, and that allows students to have a lot more flexibility to either stay home or to be off campus and continue to learn. Some students will be living on our campuses but still taking online classes. And then a lot of our classes are what's this year called a hybrid model, which will allow professors and students to meet in person sometimes, but also have part of their education and their interaction online. And that allows for more of that distancing, which can be important. And mask wearing. You probably, wherever you are in the world, you probably are familiar with having to wear a mask to protect everyone in your family and in your community. So schools are doing that as well. So it's a lot of the common sense things that are encouraged all over the world right now, encouraging our community members to do the same, to have very good plans in place, and to be as flexible as possible and ready to change if necessary to keep people healthy and safe. So a lot of planning, and everything is being implemented right now, probably just like at your high schools.
Great, thanks, Jenny. Marie, I know Jenny talked about finances in this one. I flip-flopped our speakers, and my apologies, but Marie, you can answer this one as well. A student has indicated an interest, a question about a net price calculator. And I know every college and university in the US is required to have a net price calculator on their website. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and what happens if maybe an international student is filling it out and perhaps it's not producing the numbers they were hoping for?
Yeah, I would say the net price calculator, as you said, is a requirement. So we all have them, and it is in our interest to make our net price calculators as realistic and honest as possible. We're not trying to do smoke and mirrors with the net price calculator. But I will say that for international students, sometimes a net price calculator can be difficult to fill out, and being able to convert currency or other information into the fields that a net price calculator may have. And there are a lot of different kinds of net price calculators out there, some that are very simple and straightforward and others that are much more complicated. So if you are having any trouble with the net price calculator, I would encourage you to reach out to the admission counselor. And I would also encourage you, even if you were able to get through it and you're getting an answer that doesn't maybe feel right to you, or perhaps it isn't financially feasible for you, it's still worth it to reach out to the admission counselor, because there may be some other information that just isn't being reflected in that net price calculator that could be in your situation. So let me give you a great example. Fine arts scholarships. We cannot assess your talent for a fine arts scholarship via a net price calculator. And so that is an opportunity that would never be included in a final calculation.
Great, thanks, Marie. Somebody asked a question about SAT scores certainly being test optional with COVID. And I just wanted to let y'all know all but 2 of the CTCL schools are test optional for the next year. So it's always, as you've heard from all of us, the answer is oftentimes it depends, and you should make sure that you ask your admission counselor at each college you're applying to what's special and unique about their processes, especially for international applicants. But in terms of SAT being test optional, all but New College of Florida and Hillsdale have gone test optional for the next year. So, Rian, you gave a great answer about secondary school reports and counselor recommendations. Continuing with the recommendation theme, if a teacher wants to have a letter of recommendation translated into English, are there specific rules about doing that? How do we make sure that the documents get translated into English properly?
For recommendation letters, I don't know that there are any specific rules. We're pretty flexible with that too, because that can be challenging sometimes. Sometimes the English teacher can do it at the school, we don't need, I personally don't feel that we need recommendation letters to have a certified translation like we would for a transcript, for example. So I think someone at your school could probably do it. We would prefer that the student doesn't do it, but other than that, I don't think there's any particular rules for that.
Well, thank you all. It's been our pleasure to answer your questions and to share a bit more about the unique process that is college admissions in the US. We're so excited that you're considering coming to the US for university, and especially looking at colleges that change live schools. We wish you the very best of luck in your college search process, and please let us know if we can be of any help in the future.
Thank you so much to our panelists for sharing this information, and students and counselors, thank you for tuning in. As you close this window, a very quick 4-question survey will appear. We ask for your feedback. We encourage you to check out those individual information sessions. All of these institutions are represented individually, either upcoming or has already occurred over the past few days. The recordings, as well as the upcoming sessions through the evening, are found at strivescan.com/virtual/CTCL. Thanks, team. Have a great day.